Good morning. This is Orly Taitz. I'm a doctor of dental surgery and I'm also an attorney. And I wanted to talk for a few minutes about a very important issue of transfer of infectious diseases, which includes, of course, Ebola, a very dangerous, deadly infectious disease, as well as other infectious diseases. I currently have a case in the Southern District of Texas where I'm seeking a stay, an emergency stay and quarantine of all individuals who are crossing the US border illegally, as well as individuals who are coming here legally or illegally from countries that are affected by Ebola epidemic, among them Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia. I'm seeking a ban of travel and quarantine. The reason I'm doing so as a doctor, I'm working with multiple immigrants, and the US government has been transporting immigrants who illegally crossed the border. They've been transporting them all over the country. There was a very serious epidemic of children who were infected with enterovirus. B68, and a number of children were paralyzed, and a few died from this epidemic. So it's really dangerous. It is very important to have quarantine so people are kept for a period of time. For example, if it's Ebola, 21 days. Of other diseases should be up to 2 months to make sure they don't carry deadly infectious diseases and don't infect the population in this country. Also, during the same period, the US government can check the criminal record of those individuals. I wanted to read to you a statement which was made under the penalty of perjury by a sworn affidavit that was made by an epidemiologist with 30 years of experience. I'm going to read a few excerpts from this affidavit. It will be submitted to Judge Andrew Hanen, and we have a hearing coming on October the 29th. It's going to be in Brownsville, Texas, and it's going to be on 600 Harrison Avenue, U.S. District Court, Judge Andrew Hanen. And I hope that people will show up there and will support me just by being there in the courtroom, because we have important issues, and so far the government just dropped the ball. So without further ado, this is an affidavit of Vera Dolan, who is an epidemiologist. She has 30 years of experience. I'm not gonna go in that of giving her background. However, she has been accepted as an expert in a number of courts. Further, she states, I have brought a case stating that when I'm working with individuals who came here just recently, they crossed the border illegally, the government transports them to offices like my office and to other doctors. We have a number of doctors who caught tuberculosis, which is a very serious disease, and other infectious diseases. And as epidemiologist, she states that this trafficking, this transporting of illegal aliens by the government and sending them to different offices causes this epidemic. Further, in terms of Ebola, she writes, she provides interesting information. In a search of the peer-reviewed medical literature, I investigated the possibility of transmission of the Ebola virus through aerosols or vomits produced by coughing and sneezing. It is the type of transmission that will have a strong likelihood of infecting doctor providers for a number of government programs which provide care for new immigrants like Dr. Taitz. In 1995, 316 people became ill with Ebola hemorrhagic fever, EHF, in Kikwit, Democratic Republic of Congo. After extensive epidemiologic evaluation, the routes of transmission of Ebola for these patients were assessed. There were a group of infected patients who reported no physical contact with someone with suspected EHF. The investigator stated, although close contact while caring for an infected person was probably the major route of transmission in this and previous EHF outbreaks, the virus may have been transmitted by touch, droplet, airborne particles, or vomit. Thus, expansion of the use of barrier techniques to include casual contacts might prevent or mitigate future epidemics. A series of research experiments in Canada exposing pigs carrying the Ebola virus, ZEBOV, to uninfected macaque monkeys showed that the Ebola virus can be transmitted within the room in which these animals were in cages separated by a wire barrier. The investigator stated, under conditions of the current study, transmission of ZEBOV could have occurred either by inhalation, by aerosol or large droplets, and or droplets generated during the cleaning of the room. And we know that recently a nurse in Spain was infected with Ebola virus, and she was wearing all protective gear, which supports this notion that Ebola can be transmitted by air, that Ebola virus can be airborne. Infection of all four macaques in the environment, preventing direct contact between the two species and between the macaques themselves, support the concept of airborne transmission. In September 2014, the United States brought 2 infected charity workers from Africa to the United States homeland to be treated for Ebola with an experimental cocktail of 3 monoclonal antibodies. 3 monoclonal antibodies. The US government and the world media announced that these 2 relief workers were cured of Ebola with this new treatment. As of today, October 10, 2014, there are world media reports of several patients being treated in the United States with other experimental drugs to achieve a cure. Jesse Goodman, MD, MPH, formerly the chief scientist of the US Food and Drug Administration and currently a founding director of the Georgetown University Medical Center Center for Medical Product Access, Safety, and Stewardship, in a recent article in the New England Journal of Medicine stated that using unproven therapies during emergencies without adequately evaluating their effectiveness may result in misleading, even harmful conclusions. An African national was able to fly from Africa to the United States knowing that he was exposed to Ebola. It is my belief that this individual thought that he would receive the cure for Ebola if he arrived in the United States and showed up for treatment in any hospital emergency room. It is my belief that because of the international media coverage of the cure of Ebola that is only available in the United States, that African nationals will attempt to travel to the United States in any way possible once they believe that they've been exposed to Ebola. I believe those African nationals believe that they will receive the cure for Ebola and they come down with Ebola disease in the United States. As of today, the United States does not restrict air travel from Africa to the United States. As of today, Mexico and many Central American countries do not restrict air travel from Africa to their countries. It is my belief that African nationals who know that they have been exposed to Ebola will try to come to the United States directly through air travel to the United States or through air travel to Mexico or Central America, and then attempt to cross the U.S. border with Mexico in the belief that they will be cured once they appear in any U.S. hospital. As Dr. Goodman indicated, these individuals can come to the harmful conclusion that there are sufficient resources in the United States to cure the Ebola illness, and there is no evidence that this conclusion is accurate. It is my belief that some of the African nationals who attempt to cross the border into the U.S. from Mexico will become infectious while still in Mexico during the time they are moving from Mexico into the United States and will pass the Ebola virus on to other immigrant patients who are seeking entrance to the United States by crossing the border. This likely infection of immigrants is only enhanced by the potential transmission of Ebola from aerosols and vomits caused by coughing and sneezing, as indicated by the previously cited peer-reviewed medical literature. The potential of a threat of an Ebola epidemic arriving via illegal immigration from Mexico is serious and grave, and needs to be addressed by the closure of the Mexican border and strict quarantine and isolation procedures for all immigrants crossing the Mexican border. In my opinion, any individual who crosses the Mexican border, and in particular had visited the Ebola-affected countries of Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia, should be quarantined for 21 days. The potential for Ebola arriving into the United States through air travel is now well established. It is urgent that the air travel is restricted from Africa, and the most strict quarantine and isolation procedures for all travelers arriving from Africa's Ebola-affected regions are put into place. In my opinion, any individual who has visited the Ebola-affected African countries of Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia should be quarantined for 21 days, and that's exactly what I asked the judge to do in my case. Such individuals should be put on a no-fly list to be kept in force until they're officially declared end of the current Ebola epidemic. Merely screening air travelers from Ebola-affected regions for elevated body temperature is an inadequate measure, as these individuals can be early in the incubation period before fever appears, or may take over the counter analgesics and reduce fever and mask the presence of infection with Ebola. As of today, countries such as Great Britain, South Korea, and United Emirates suspended all flights to Ebola-affected countries. Several African countries such as Kenya, Namibia, and Zambia banned all travel from Ebola-affected regions. The suspension ban of travel from Ebola-affected regions is a far more prudent public health barrier to the spread of Ebola from Africa to the United States than the current proposal to simply screen travelers seeking to fly into the United States. The risk of infection with Ebola from immigrant patients will be the highest among the U.S. medical professionals, who are tasking to be the first people to treat these immigrant patients for any reason. The possible transmission of Ebola through aerosols or vomits, in addition to direct personal contact, as indicated in the peer-reviewed medical literature, presents a dangerous hazard to providers like Dr. Taitz, who are treating immigrant patients exposed to Ebola who come to the U.S. seeking treatment. In my opinion, Dr. Taitz is an imminent danger from Ebola and other communicable diseases from any immigrant patient who is not adequately screened, evaluated, isolated, or quarantined for Ebola and other communicable diseases at the time of entry into the United States illegally or legally. I declare that my assessments are true and correct based on my current knowledge. Vera Dolan, Master of Public Health, October 10th, 2014. So I do hope that the viewers will support me and will be there in court on October 29th in Brownsville, Texas, the 600 Harrison Avenue, and it's the courtroom of Judge Andrew Hanen. And I hope that we can have an order of stay, an injunction, which would stop travel from Ebola-affected nations, which would quarantine people for 21 days who came from those nations, as well as quarantine anybody who came illegally to this country, to make sure that these individuals do not carry infectious diseases, that they do not have a criminal record in the countries of origin, and that they are not terrorists who are seeking to do harm to this nation. Thank you for viewing this report. This is Orly Taitz. Thank you.